Okay, so today we're gonna dive into something pretty cool, I think. You sent me these pages, and it's a whole printable workbook. Like, wow, like a whole curriculum almost, right? For early learning.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look at these activities. They start really basic with colors and shapes and things like that. But then they go all the way to like the beginnings of reading and understanding numbers.
Right.
And the thing is, I think, our mission here is to see what makes these activities so important. They seem simple on the surface.
Yeah.
But what are they actually building? Like, what's the foundation here?
Well, and it's especially interesting because I don't know if you saw this, but the proceeds from this printable workbook actually go to helping kids who maybe don't have gadgets to support their online learning.
Wow.
So it really adds another layer to it, right?
Yeah.
Because these simple activities that we take for granted, some kids don't even have access to.
It does. It really adds a whole other level to this.
Yeah.
And the range of activities is just incredible. So, we've got everything from matching colors with everyday objects to matching colors of stars.
Yeah.
And then looking at shades of colors. Then you get into sorting jelly beans.
Yeah.
Like what?
It's very hands-on.
And then combining colors with shapes. And then shapes. Okay, so now we're talking about patterns of shapes and tracing shapes.
Yeah.
And then figuring out like which objects around us have those shapes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of real world connection there.
Yeah.
And then, wow, alphabet matching. Matching letters to pictures.
Right.
Tracing the whole alphabet. Using flashcards to learn letters.
Yeah.
Okay, then you get into numbers. Putting numbers in order. Doing some basic counting. Then there's these really interesting ones where you have to look at a pattern and try to figure out what comes next.
Right.
And then there's matching objects to their shadows.
Yeah.
Sorting fruits and vegetables, like the classic, right?
Yeah.
Understanding our five senses. Then it gets into like animal halves, like you're putting together the front and back halves of an animal.
Oh, a puzzle.
Yeah, and then recognizing animal sounds. And then they even have some puzzle game concepts in here, which is really neat.
Right.
It's amazing. So let's
It's pretty packed.
yeah, let's jump right in. Why don't we start with color? It seems like a very natural place to start, and this workbook does too.
Yeah, it seems to start with color identification, the most basic level of understanding colors. And they do that with a couple of activities called Color Matching 1 and Color Matching 2.
Okay.
And it's like you said, you're matching everyday objects to their colors. So like a blue backpack. Or
Yeah, like a brown peanut.
a brown peanut, exactly. And then they've got all these stars in different colors.
Oh, cool.
So you've got red, yellow, pink, all those kind of basic colors that we start with. And this is, it's more than just knowing the name. This is really the beginning of visual discrimination. It's about looking at something and going, okay, this blue is different from this red.
Yeah, and being able to tell that this blue is the same as the blue
Exactly.
of that backpack.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's color matching.
Right.
But then they get a little more sophisticated, right? Because we have color shade.
Yes, color shade takes it a step further. So in this one,
Okay.
they give you these squares of color.
Okay.
And you're supposed to arrange them from darkest to lightest.
Interesting.
So they've got examples like, they'll start with the red and then it goes into orange and then yellow.
Oh.
Or they'll do green to blue to purple.
Interesting.
So it's not just about the name of the color anymore. Now you're understanding that each color has like a range. Like
It's a spectrum.
spectrum, yeah.
Of intensity.
Wow. So even in these very basic activities, they're already getting kids to think.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that particular activity, color shade, is that it's really training your eye.
To see really fine gradations
Okay.
in visual things. And that's going to help you later on, not just in art, but, recognizing facial expressions, small details in text.
Right, like you have to be able to see
Yeah,
those subtle differences.
exactly. It
Yeah.
all starts there.
That's fascinating. Okay, so then what's next in the color journey?
Well, then we've got color 1, where you're matching the written word for the color. So blue, red, black.
So now we're bringing in...
You're bringing in the language.
You're bringing in the language.
Yeah, the reading.
The literacy aspect.
With the rectangle of that color.
Okay.
So now you're not just seeing it, you're connecting it with its name.
Right, so there's the visual and then there's the
word.
The word, yeah.
Yeah. And then color 2 is really fun.
Okay.
It's where you sort jelly beans.
Jelly beans. Okay, so now we're bringing in the
candy?
The fun, the hands-on,
the hands-on, the
deliciousness.
deliciousness.
Okay, so how does that work?
So you've got red, green, yellow, blue jelly beans,
Okay.
and you're sorting them into jars that have matching colored lids.
So it's like a
Little game.
little game, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a way to really reinforce
Yeah.
that color identification, but in a fun way.
It's practical too, right? Like I could see a kid
Yeah.
actually wanting to do that.
Totally. And then you've got color with shapes,
Oh, okay.
which I think is interesting because now it brings the two together.
It's integrative.
It is.
Yeah.
So you're placing colored stars like blue, red, and green
Okay.
next to the outlines of shapes. So you've got a square, a circle, and a triangle.
So you're not just seeing the color and the shape, you're actually starting to
You're associating them.
associate them. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're starting to see, okay, this is a blue square, not just a blue thing.
That's really cool. Okay, so that's a great overview of how they handle color
Right.
in this workbook. Let's move on to shapes then, because that's another big
Yes.
foundational piece. Yeah, and it starts with an activity called shape pattern.
Okay.
And in this one, they give you a bunch of triangle shapes, and you use those triangles to complete a picture of a sun.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not just recognizing a triangle. Now you're seeing how triangles can be used to make a bigger image.
It's like parts and whole in a way, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's building that spatial reasoning,
Okay.
that understanding of how objects relate to each other in space.
Because you're not just randomly
Right.
placing the triangles, you have to figure out
You have to think about it.
how they fit together.
Exactly. And that's going to help later on with, packing a suitcase, understanding architecture.
Right, right. All those things where you're trying to figure out how things fit into a
Yeah,
given space.
exactly.
That's amazing. Okay, so then we move on, to tracing.
Yeah, shape trace is next. And this is really about those fine motor skills.
Okay.
So they give you the basic shapes: squares, ovals, triangles, circles, hexagons, rectangles, and you have to trace them and then color them in.
So it's like a physical
It's physical.
engagement with the shape.
Exactly. And what's interesting about that, I think, is that when you're tracing,
Yeah,
you're really solidifying that visual memory of what the shape is,
right.
but you're also strengthening all those little muscles
Yeah.
in your hand and wrist.
The pre-writing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So important for pre-writing, for handwriting later on.
Right, because if you can't even control your hand, you're not going to be able to form those
It is
letters. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So after the tracing, then what?
Well, then we have shapes, which is pretty straightforward.
Okay.
It's just matching the names of the shapes
Right.
that the outlines. So you've got square, circle, rectangle, oval, all those basic shapes.
So that's really about building
Vocabulary
You're literally putting a name to
to the visual.
the visual. Okay.
Yeah.
And then there's one more shape activity, right?
Yeah. Yes, and I think this one's really clever.
Oh, yeah?
It's called shapes and objects.
Okay.
And what they do is they give you a shape. It could be a circle, a triangle, a star.
Right.
And then you have these cutouts of different objects,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to figure out which objects match that shape.
So this is where it gets really like
Real world.
real world application, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of objects would they have?
Well, for a circle, they might have a clock
Okay.
or a soccer ball.
Mm-hmm.
And for a triangle, they might have a warning sign
Okay.
or even a sandwich.
Interesting. Because a sandwich, like
You can have.
cut in half is a triangle,
Exactly. So it's not always so obvious. You really have to think about,
like a pizza slice.
yeah, a pizza slice.
Would be a triangle.
Exactly.
That's really cool. Okay, so we've covered colors, we've covered shapes.
Right.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the next logical step is the alphabet.
Okay, so we're getting into
literacy now. The building blocks of reading.
So how do they start with that?
Well, they have an activity called alphabet matching.
Okay.
And in this one, they show you a picture, and you have to match it with the letter that it starts with.
So this is really about understanding that words are made up of
Sounds.
sounds.
Yeah.
And that those sounds can be represented by letters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you might have a picture of a zebra,
Right.
and you have to match it with the letter Z.
It seems simple, but it's really laying the groundwork
It
for
is so foundational
for being able to
read.
read,
Yeah.
to decode.
Exactly. That connection between the spoken language
Mm.
and the written word.
And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, it all starts there.
Okay, so after alphabet matching, what comes next?
Then you've got alphabets,
Okay.
which takes it a step further.
Okay.
Now you're tracing the letters.
Okay.
So both uppercase and lowercase, A through Z,
Mm-hmm.
and each letter has a picture of something that starts with that letter. Oh, that's nice. So it's like a,
It's a visual reminder.
yeah, visual connection.
Yeah,
So you've got the letter A with an avocado.
exactly. B with a butterfly, C with a car, and so on.
So you're seeing the letter, you're writing the letter, and you're,
Making that
yeah,
connection.
connecting it to,
A word and a picture.
yeah, a word and an image. That's really cool.
It's a multi-sensory approach to learning the alphabet.
I like that.
Yeah.
Multisensory, yeah. And then they also have flashcards in here.
Yeah, so they've got these flashcards,
Okay.
and they're similar to the alphabet's activity,
Okay.
where you've got the uppercase and lowercase letter, a picture, and the word.
It's interesting because these only go up to V.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I wonder if,
Maybe they ran out of space or something.
yeah, maybe it's just a section, a part of a larger set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, it's,
It's another way
yeah, another visual way to see
to see the letters.
the letters and connect them with sounds and words.
And I think the more ways you encounter it,
The stronger that connection becomes.
exactly. All right, so we've done the alphabet.
Right.
Let's tackle numbers now. What do we got?
Well, we have a couple of numbers activities,
Okay.
and these focus on putting numbers in sequence.
Okay, so like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, but in these activities, they actually ask you to put numbers on a train
Oh, fun.
and a caterpillar.
Okay.
And what's interesting is the numbers aren't actually printed on the pages,
Oh, that's interesting.
but you have separate cutouts with the numbers 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Okay, so it's focusing on that specific sequence of numbers.
Exactly. So maybe they're assuming you've already got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down.
Right.
And now you're understanding the order within this higher range of numbers.
So it's like you're building on that basic
Exactly.
understanding of counting.
It's like, okay, you know how to count to 5. Now let's see if you understand how these bigger numbers fit in.
It's a nice progression.
Yeah.
And then after that, there's a counting activity.
Right. And in counting, you're counting groups of objects.
Okay, so like,
So they'll have a picture with, 2 figures or 4 cars or 7 cherries on a cake.
so you're counting up the objects.
Exactly. And then you would, I'm assuming, use those same cutouts,
Right, the 6 through 10.
6 through 10, to indicate how many you counted.
That's great. So they're really drilling down on,
Yeah, this is like number sense 101.
yeah, like that one-to-one correspondence.
Exactly.
That each object represents a number.
And that final number represents the total quantity.
That's so important. Okay, what else do we have in this workbook?
Well, then they get into patterns and sequences.
Okay, so this is interesting because now we're talking about
More abstract thinking.
abstract thinking, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a general patterns activity,
Okay,
and it's just different arrangements of shapes and colors.
so like visual pattern.
Visual patterns, exactly. And I think what's interesting about that is that recognizing patterns is such a fundamental skill.
It really is.
It's not just about math.
Right.
It's about seeing order in things, predicting what might come next.
Yeah, and it applies to so many things.
Language, music, even just like, solving problems in your daily life.
Totally. And then they have what comes next.
Yes. What comes next is fun.
Okay, so what kind of sequences do they have in there?
Well, they've got like repeating patterns of shapes.
Okay.
So maybe it's a square, circle, square, circle.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out what the next shape is.
Right.
And then they have these little sequences of objects.
Like what?
Like an umbrella, an ice cream cone, an umbrella. So you have to figure out, okay, what's the pattern here? What comes next?
Right.
And they even have some with arrows.
Arrows.
Interesting. Yeah, so like left arrow, right arrow, down arrow.
So you're figuring out the directional.
The directional pattern, exactly.
That's really cool. Okay. So,
Yeah, and they've got some with beetles and colored shapes.
wow, that's a lot of different types of patterns.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think that's good because it really gets you thinking.
Yeah, like you can't just.
You can't just memorize the pattern.
Right, you have to actually understand the rule.
Exactly.
The underlying rule.
That's what it's all about. It's about logical thinking, predicting skills.
Okay. So we've done colors, shapes, alphabet, numbers, patterns.
Right.
What else have we got in this incredible workbook?
Well, they've got some fun activities with shadows.
Shadows are always cool.
They are.
Yeah, what do they do with shadows?
Well, they have these shadow matching activities.
Okay.
And you have to match the pictures with their shadows.
Ooh, that's fun.
And they've got all sorts of categories.
Okay, like what?
So they've got fruits and vegetables,
Okay.
land vehicles, water vehicles, air vehicles.
Oh, they really cover a lot.
They do.
So you might have a picture of a pineapple and you have to find its shadow.
Exactly.
And that's good for what? Like what skills does that build?
Well, I think it's really good for visual perception
Okay.
and spatial reasoning
Okay.
because you have to really focus on the outline of the object and understand that, even though the lighting might be different,
Right.
the object still has that same basic shape.
Yeah, you're stripping away all the other
Exactly.
visual information
Yeah.
and you're just focusing on the
The essence of the shape.
Yeah, the essence of the shape. That's really neat.
Yeah, and it's a skill that we use all the time, you know?
Right, like when you see a...
When you see a sign in the distance.
Yeah, or like a...
Or a person walking towards you.
Right.
You're using those same skills to recognize what it is.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay, what else have we got?
Well, then there's the classic fruits and vegetables activity.
Oh, yeah, the sorting.
The sorting. So you cut out pictures of different fruits and vegetables.
Like apples and strawberries and...
Yeah, apples, strawberries, cauliflower, peas,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to put them in the correct basket.
So you've got a fruits basket and a vegetables basket.
Exactly.
And this is really about
Categorization.
understanding that there are groups, categories, yeah.
Yeah, and that things can belong to different categories based on their characteristics.
Right.
So it's a simple activity,
Yeah.
but it's really laying the groundwork for how we organize information.
Right, because the world is full of
Categories. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
Well, then we have an activity called My Five Senses.
Oh, this is a good one.
This was really interesting because they give you these representations of your five senses.
Okay, so like a picture of an eye.
Yeah, an eye, a nose, an ear, a mouth, a hand.
Okay.
And then you have to match them with pictures that relate to those senses.
So it's like...
So for sight, they might have a picture of a television.
Okay.
For taste, they might have a picture of ice cream.
Right.
For touch, they might have a picture of a teddy bear.
So you're connecting those abstract senses with actual concrete
experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for kids.
Yeah.
Because it helps them to understand what those senses actually mean.
Right, because if you just say, what is your sense of taste?
It's abstract.
Just abstract, yeah.
But if you say, okay, taste is when you eat ice cream.
Right.
Now it's concrete.
It's something they can relate to.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so we've done our senses. What's next?
Well, then we move on to animals.
Animals.
Okay. Yeah, and they've got several activities with animals.
Okay, like what?
Well, they have land animals, water animals, and air animals.
Oh, cool. So they're breaking it down by
habitat.
Yeah.
And in these activities, you have to match the front half of an animal with its back half.
Oh, that's fun.
So it's like a little puzzle.
Yeah, like a visual puzzle.
Exactly.
So you might have the head of a dog, and you have to find the
back end of the dog.
The back end of the dog. And that's good for, like...
Well, it's good for visual discrimination.
Okay.
It's good for recognizing different animals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also good for understanding, you know, the idea of parts and whole, that an animal is made up of different parts.
Yeah.
Fit together in a specific way.
That's really cool. And then there's one more animal activity, right?
Yes, and this one's really cute.
Okay.
It's called animal sounds.
Oh, I love this one.
This one's fun.
Yeah, tell me about it.
So you have these pictures of different animals, like a pig, a horse, a duck, a sheep.
Okay.
And you have to match them with their sounds.
So you've got oink, poink, neigh, neigh.
Exactly. Quack, quack.
That's so cute.
Yeah.
And that's really good for...
Well, it's connecting the visual image with the sound.
Yeah, like what it looks like with what it sounds like.
Exactly. And that kind of cross-modal learning is really helpful for memory and understanding.
Right, because you're not just seeing the animal.
Right.
You're also hearing it.
You're hearing it.
And that creates a stronger connection in the brain.
Exactly.
That's really cool. Okay, so we've done animals. What's left?
Well, the last activity is puzzle games.
Oh.
And it's interesting because they show these images of things like an elephant, a sun, an apple, a house.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like there's supposed to be missing pieces.
Oh, like a puzzle?
Yeah, but the pieces aren't actually provided in the workbook.
Oh, interesting.
So it's more like the concept of a puzzle.
Right.
But even without the pieces, I think it's a good inclusion.
Yeah, because it introduces the idea.
Yeah, the idea that a whole grass is made up of parts.
Right.
And that those parts fit together in a specific way.
Yeah.
So it's about spatial reasoning, problem solving.
Visual analysis.
Yeah, all those good things.
That's really cool. And beyond all these specific activities, I really like that they have an About Me page.
Yes, that's a nice touch.
And a My Activity checklist.
Yeah, I like that too.
Because that really gets the kid involved in
our own learning.
Their own learning, yeah.
Yeah, and the checklist is good because it's like,
I did this, I did this.
Exactly. It's like, look at all the things I've learned.
And it creates a sense of accomplishment.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really smart. And then, of course, they have a congratulations page.
Of course.
And a certificate of achievement.
And those good job stickers.
Oh, yes, the stickers.
Can't forget the stickers.
That's so important.
It is.
Because it's that positive reinforcement.
Yeah, it's like, you did it. You learned something new.
Exactly. And that makes them want to
learn more.
Learn more.
Yeah.
So as we've seen, this workbook is packed
It is.
with so many important early learning concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how these simple exercises are actually building these fundamental cognitive skills.
Yeah, and motor skills, too.
Right, that fine motor control.
Exactly.
So, when we think about it,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing a red square,
Right.
that's not just about naming a color and a shape.
It's the beginning of visual literacy.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of categorization.
Right.
Understanding that there are different categories.
And then understanding the alphabet, that unlocks.
The whole world of written communication.
Yeah, it's the key.
It is.
And then grasping those early number concepts, that's the foundation for all future math.
Yeah.
So it's really incredible to see how it all connects.
It is.
Like when you think about
Okay.
learning the letter A and connecting it with the word apple,
Right.
you're connecting a visual symbol with a sound,
With a concept.
with a concept.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So when you look at all these activities together,